It's your movie review man. I'm Jeff Johnson, and this is
Claude Faitier.
Once again, we're here to review our favorite topics. We love film. We know you love too, so join the conversation. Today's conversation, it's going to be an interesting one. We're going to talk about the liberation of L.B. Jones. Actually, we're going to talk about how we almost didn't talk about the liberation of L.B. Jones and why. Claude, tell them a little bit about that.
Okay. Yeah, this is a departure for us, and we basically feel that we need to take a little more care in dealing with this movie. This is an older movie that came out in 1970, and I actually was inspired to pick this movie out because recently on a podcast, it's called Pure Cinema Podcast, which is hosted by Brian Soar, Elric Kane, and guest/co-host Quentin Tarantino, because when he comes on the show, he ends up anyway becoming sort of like the host. But they did a show that was on directors' final movies. Now, Elric Kane had mentioned the movie, and it was a fascinating show, but to tell you the truth, I was distracted while I was listening to it. So I remember the title, I remember Roscoe Lee Brown was in it, and I think they definitely talked about the obstacles that he was going to be facing. But seeing that someone had mentioned blaxploitation, and you know that in blaxploitation movies, characters may face racism and something, in the back of your mind, you feel, okay, somehow or another, the hero is going to come up on the upswing towards the end or something like that. So I recommended this idea to Jeff without having seen the movie. And then when I saw the movie, I immediately was like, whoa. I literally texted Jeff as soon as I was done, sort of apologizing because the movie was awfully triggering. And it's not just a matter of I felt uncomfortable. This thing was triggering because the racism that the character goes through is multiple levels. But excuse me, sorry. But it was also triggering because
because a lot of things are going to unpack.
Yeah, there was multiple levels. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
It's a lot
I'm
like
sorry,
Pandora's box, or peeling an onion. The more you keep unraveling this thing, the more there is to it. And kind of like an onion, the more you unravel, there's a little bit more to it that puts a little sting in your eye and makes you and a sting in your nose. And so the liberation of L.B. Jones was a lot more than meets the eye, and a lot more than just a film director's last film.
Okay, yeah, and you hit on something with Pandora's box, because the thing that I actually felt like the movie I wanted to refer to in terms of how I felt with this movie was literally Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Okay.
And I honestly felt like I actually felt like Belloc, who is the antagonist to Indiana Jones, knowledgeable about history. They're sort of they're sort of going at each other, one-upping each other. Usually Belloc ends up with a combination of resourcefulness, and with resources is able to get the whatever Indiana Jones finds taken away from him. So he's a good archaeologist, but he's also very strategic and steals someone else's stuff. And the reason I think about Belloc is that although Indiana Jones finds the Ark, Belloc uses the Nazi armies to claim the Ark. Indiana Jones knows enough to keep his eyes shut, because I'm watching this. I started watching this movie. You're seeing, in the beginning, it's like, the director's William Wyler, who won 3 Academy Awards. You see that it's written by Sterling Sullivan, who won an Academy Award for a movie with Sidney Poitier in it. So you're thinking, okay, this is going to be something that's going to have a strong Black character. And then it was shot by Robert Surtees, who also won 3 Academy Awards. So just on the opening beginning, as beautiful as the beginning looks and opening credits, between the writer and the cameraman, you got 7 Academy Awards right there. All right, so you're thinking, oh God, this is gonna be great. And it's beautiful looking. You see the characters that are very well defined. It looks great, but so it's like Belloc, and he sees the angels and the things coming out. The things are looking all beautiful. But the moment after Lord Byron Jones goes to a cattle auction and his lawyer tells him that the wife is contesting the divorce, and he heads home to Lola Falana, who immediately starts, disrespecting him in every way. It was like that beautiful angel flying around turned into the specter of death. And as the movie went on, I could literally feel lightning bolts blasting through my chest. I could feel my face melting and eventually blowing up just like Belloc. Wow. And it was to the point where I was like, did I hear this podcast correctly? I actually went back to listen to the podcast. Was like, what did I miss? And I had to realize that I was the one who slipped because I was driving. So I missed certain details, and I was like, yeah, they laid out, the stuff that was happening. And
so that's the setup.
Yeah.
He fell into this film. Claude fell into this film. He dropped
that was set up to us choosing. I'm sorry.
Watched it twice, and then found more and more, like most things in life, ladies and gentlemen, the truth is stranger than fiction. The more you unpacked and investigated this film, the more its history, becomes even more an unpacking of the uncomfortableness of this film. So stay tuned to after our break. Find out what it is that perplexed your 2 movie review men so much about this film. Is this this is definitely a deep cut. Is this one of our rants and rave episodes? It must have to be. It must have. And you don't want to miss it. The Liberation of L.B. Jones. Watch how we break down first, since you probably haven't seen it yourself, and decide for yourself what you think about it next. And we'll be covering that right next in full movie review men glory right after this break.
Yes.
It's your movie review, man. We're back. Please make sure, if you like these rants and raves, if you have a particular film that you want us to unpack and see if we can explain to you why we didn't review it and why we should review it. We're your men. We're your movie review men. Like, comment, and subscribe. So the show, as we opened up with you, is The Liberation of L.B. Jones. And this show today is maybe the liberation of your movie review men, and why we started down a path on a film that we're not really going to review. So we're reviewing it, but we're not really reviewing it. And why? And why we're not reviewing it. So Claude, you gave him the intro. It was quite, I've never heard of such analogy before. You took a deep, deep cut. For all of us Indiana Jones fans, first you have to be one of those. The first Indiana Jones film, and then the villain of the first Indiana Jones film, and then understand what was wrong with the villain of the first Indiana Jones film. Claude's trying to explain to you that that's how he is now relative to this film.
Yes, yeah. I didn't use all the knowledge that I should have used, and I got dazzled and then burned by this. So, but yeah, no, this was just this was a little bit of a journey, because usually we just sort of review and we give our opinions of movies. But what is so crazy about the movie wasn't the fact that it was just, racially charged, emotionally triggering in itself in terms of a couple hours. And I'm not against that if there's a higher good, but you can't, it's like, okay, 12 Years a Slave, are you going to say, hey, definitely go see it, the feel good movie of the summer? No. But what is interesting about the story is, it's a matter of not just what was done in terms of from the beginning to the end of the movie, but there are certain information about what happened outside of the movie. For some reason, one has a sense that the movie was sort of, in a way, just sort of being buried. If you look at Oscar Lee Brown's obituary, they really don't mention the movie, even though this was a big budget movie that he was the star of.
Right, which drew you in to try to explore why. What's missing? First, you got drew in because you quickly were listening to a podcast. You didn't listen to it completely, and you didn't look at the poster completely and said, hey, on the subject of last films by directors, this one came up and you jumped on it. So we jumped on it, watched it. Watching it, we're like, this brings up more questions of what exactly about this film was why I should have looked at it, because it's not exactly what I thought it was and appeared to be. Let's stay on a few let me get my 2 cents in before all your research unpacking covers. Let's cover some of the high levels. You covered what the film is essentially about. It's about L.B. Jones, Lord Byron Jones, the character, who is the undertaker, who is the funeral home director, the Black funeral home director, the Negro funeral home director. I think they call him the colored funeral home director, although later they used other words to describe him. But he was, the Black funeral home director for this small South Carolina town, which maybe is a real town, actually.
No, I think it's supposed to be Somerset County, Tennessee. Is that
Tennessee? You're right. I got caught on the S part. Somerset, Tennessee, which is presumably a real town.
Inspired by a real town. I think he chose the name, but it's inspired by a real town.
By a real town, and we'll come to it later. The people from that real town figured out that it was about them, and they didn't like it. And so, as we talk about this town, the Black undertaker was deciding he's going to divorce his wife, and because he's wealthy enough, he's going to get the most prominent white lawyer from the town to be his divorce lawyer. So, so he uses his wealth and influence as much as a Black man can have at this time, which is supposed to be present day, presumably. It's present day, late 60s, Somerset, Tennessee. And he goes and uses his wealth and privilege to hire the most prominent lawyer in town to do his divorce. And right away you see that even if he's the most prominent, he clears to be the most, well-off and prominent Black in the town, the most prominent lawyer in the town was kind of dismissive of him. He was saying right off the top that he's too busy. He's busy bringing on board his nephew. He's childless himself. He has no one to pass on. He's single, never married, childless, and looking to pass on his legacy to his nephew by bringing his nephew on board. The movie begins with 2 folks traveling into town, 2 sets of people traveling into town. This nephew and his young bride traveling to town, and they're giddy and excited about the promise of where they're headed, and everything looks new and exciting to them. Farmers, a farmer tilling his hay in a field, that's exciting to them. Presumably city slickers from up north traveling to the south to start this new adventure together as a young lawyer couple. And then they show a young Black man, and this young Black man is played by Yaphet Kotto. That's drawing me in, a very young Yaphet Kotto, who looks young, behaves, kind of carelessly, a little bit recklessly. He's not really, he's not street smart. And he's young and a little reckless. How can you tell he's young and reckless? Because he's also traveling into the city, but he's not looking out the window and thinking about the excitement and adventure that he's about to head toward. His look out the window is different from the white lawyer and his wife's look. When he looks out the window, he just sees Black people in the Black part of town, segregated. Not necessarily everything looking bad that he sees, but it is so very clearly segregated. They own less land, they're closer together in population density. Many of them are less financially well off and poor. The white lawyer couple sees a Black child riding on his bicycle and thinks, wow, isn't this exciting, a wonderful place to raise a child? And they even look at each other with dreamy eyes, like maybe one day we'll raise a child riding a bicycle down the street. But the Black Nakakoto looks at the views out the window differently. Segregated, all Black community, Blacks have to stay together. Those Blacks you see seem to have less. They certainly have less land than whites.
Yeah, you particularly see that they're living in what you would call, I guess, sort of like the little plantation or sort of like the shanty cabins. They're very small, you know, just probably one room cabin, and yeah, and that was one of the reasons why I was sort of drawn in, because you see the perspective in terms of who the characters are and what they see in terms of coming into town, and I think you hit it right on the head in terms of how they show that.
And so that's how this movie introduces itself, how it starts out. Young Nakakoto. And let's pass a moment to cover Nakakoto. It's engaging enough because Nakakoto passed away this year in 2021, just a few months ago. Nakakoto, goes way back with me. I don't remember a young Nakakoto because my entire life, Nakakoto was this big, strong, dark-skinned, Black, deep voice having, powerful character in all the films he had, and smarter than everyone else he was dealing with. You know, one of my favorite movie series, of course, are as you know, Claude, and many fans will come to know, as I love the 007 series. And Nakakoto as a Bond villain was amazing, impeccable. He had an empire of crime. He had not to spoil a 1970s film, but Nakakoto played multiple characters in this film, and ran an international empire of crime, matched up against James Bond in one of the better Bond films. It gave us it gave us Afro-Caribbean, it gave us African American, it gave us New Orleans Creole style. Didn't really delve that much into his own heritage, not to think about it. It impacts so much. But go ahead.
Just another thing, the Bond stories were acknowledging, sort of in a way, the Blaxploitation film movement by coming up with the idea of a Black character. But then you also hit on the other things, you know, Jeffrey Holder being the voodoo priest and all this type of stuff. And yeah, so just go ahead. I'm sorry. Just go ahead.
So Nakakoto has been around a long time and is prolific, and predominantly, again, in my mind view, strong, smart, deep bellowing voice. Whether he's the good guy or the bad guy, he's a bad dude who you don't want to mess with. And watching him in this film clearly as a young person, a very young Nakakoto, but he's playing a young person, 19, 20, returning back to the South, not streetwise and not knowledgeable, on a mission, but not on a mission driven with wisdom and knowledge. His youthfulness as such is revealed almost immediately because he's traveling with a cigar box, and he opens the cigar box to reveal a bar of soap and a revolver. So, of course, as we talked about, any film with a short revolver, somebody's got to get shot. This film at least addresses that, but has a nice twist to it. It's not exactly how you expect.
Yeah, it's interesting because the cigar box and the gun are both devices that come in and out of the story a number of times. I would go on to add, I don't necessarily think that he's maybe not street smart, but I think in terms of him coming back to that town, he is sort of reverted back to his childhood. I love the playful scene when, and I don't know if you were going to get to this, when he's going back to the home where he was raised, and he sees in the foreground the basketball hoop, and he playfully jumps up and he heads some basketball, and he has this look on his face. And that automatically tells you the story that he has not been there since he was a child. So he is, you know, I mean, I think to a certain degree, he has a certain sense of streetwiseness, but he is brought back sort of like to being a child, like, you know, when you meet old friends or you go back to the place and it's like you're a little kid again.
Right. No doubt about that. But they also show how, you know, he jumps off the train because the town's so small that the train didn't even stop. Well, it didn't stop in the black neighborhood. The train did stop, but the train station is nowhere where the black people live. So he jumped out the train before the train came into the station, and tumbled and dropped the gun. And then later he went and got some food and snacks to eat while he's walking the rest of the way that he needs to get to the homeland where he woke up. And he forgot he left the gun at the counter with the grocery store clerk. He was just not being careful. Or more specifically, not just that he's not being careful, he's not used to handling a gun. He's not a killer. He's not used to handling a gun. He doesn't know what he's doing with this gun. He just knows he's here to do something with the gun. So that's setting up one component, right? The movie begins with, who is this young man? Why is he carrying this gun? For what purpose? Because he clearly got from some purpose beyond what he's used to doing, because he don't even know how to take care of and keep track of a gun. And so that starts to unpack and unfold. And then why are we covering this young lawyer, played by Lee Majors? Again, I'm growing up watching Lee Majors as the $6 Million Man, so he's always a good guy in my storylines. And now here's a much younger version of him as a good guy. And the very, very young, his young bride, she's in lots of films. I can't even believe she's in this film. She carries on.
Barbara Hershey.
Barbara Hershey is in this film.
4 years at the beginning of her career. It was like 4 years into filmmaking. So she is very, very, very young.
And I'm just like, wow, Barbara Hershey's in this film too? You know, how did all these people get in this film? And then the L.B. Jones, the titular character who wants to get a divorce, he's middle-aged in this film, but you know, I'm used to him always being a grandpa. As far as I'm concerned, he was a grandpa his entire life. Roscoe Lee Brown is on a different world as the old professor who's not, you know, trying to hear what Whitley and what the other characters are trying to their college hijinks. He's not interested in that. Huh?
In a different world. Yeah,
in a different world, right? That's how I'm used to him. As far as I'm concerned, he was always a gray-haired, a scholarly professor. And if he's not that, he's somebody's great grandpa in every film. So watching him as a middle-aged man trying to divorce Lola Falana, who I, to be honest, I just know her by name. I was like, oh, is that some really fine black woman from the past? Yeah, that's pretty much all I knew. Yeah. I knew she was supposed to be fine.
Definitely remember her from Love Boat. But
for sure.
Definitely will know her from this movie too, for many reasons.
Yes, after this film, you won't forget. So all this is setting up nicely, even though this film didn't seem necessarily, like, to your point, Claude, I didn't know exactly why you wanted me to watch this film or where it was going, but it was worth watching to see how they're going to unpack this type of story. And also, back to your part, the mystery of how is this film unknown to us? If it in fact was somehow, you know, a great film of this period, well, I feel like I've watched the great films around this period. Not just around the black exploitation films, but as you mentioned, Poitier and others did some very good films. They acted in some very good films, directed by white directors and written by white authors that were still quite good films on depicting a race in America in an open-eyed way, addressing the ills and the rights and wrongs. It could be this, right? And it's certainly got this nice-looking cast so that it could be this. So I'm waiting to see. You know, it unpacks the question why it wasn't this film one of those films. And what am I watching with this strong cast behind it, including, again, as I'll close out on my kind of Yaphet Kotto tribute, the strong, the beginnings of Mr. Yaphet Kotto, early stages of his career. We go on to see him in Alien. He was outstanding in Alien. Every role Yaphet Kotto plays, he stands out. He stands up. No matter what, as supporting roles. Sure, he was in some of black exploitations like Friday.
Friday Foster.
Friday Foster. That was, obviously that wasn't his film, but he was still, his character stands out in it. I remember him playing Idi Amin Dada in on Raven and Teddy. Again, I was too young to see that in the theater. I don't know exactly how great Radon and Teddy is. I have to go back. I just know that if anybody was going to play Idi Amin, Yaphet Kotto was crushing all aspects of that in the 95 acting credits that he had in his career. So it was great seeing Yaphet Kotto in that. And we're definitely recommending you see Yaphet Kotto in other films. Go see Yaphet Kotto in the 007 film. Go see those things. But Claude, let's talk a little bit about how the more we kept unpacking this film, the more problematic it became.
Okay. Yeah, and as you mentioned, a lot of the talent in front of the camera. I just want to add something about Yaphet Kotto. I first saw him in Alien, but I also had seen him in an episode of The Big Valley, which was made in the '60s, and he played a Buffalo soldier who came to the farm to end up taking. He had escaped from military service, so he introduced me a little bit of history, because that's where I learned about Buffalo soldiers, was through that episode, and that's when I started looking into it. But again, we're starting out with this amazing cast, and again, we got the $6 Million Man playing Mr. Mundine, and the wife played by Barbara Hershey, and then waiting for them at the train station is Omen I think it's Hedgebutch. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to take a look. Hedgepath, and he's played by L.J. Cobb. Now, L.J. Cobb, he's a very well-known actor. He's in one of my favorite movies, On the Waterfront, where he plays Johnny Friendly, the mob guy, who is basically, is the corrupting force behind the mob. So you're seeing again a great actor, but then it's like, okay, he's played some pretty big villains before, and so but we see him. He's very happy to see his nephew. He takes them from the train, I think, to his. Did he take him to the office or to his home?
He takes him straight to the office, because he wants to show them how much preparation he's made for passing on the business to him. He's already changed the name on the side of the building in a big bronze plaque. His name and his nephew's name is already in the door. And it also gives us the opportunity for them to intersect with L.B. Jones, because while he's busy introducing his nephew to the new practice that he hopes to pass on to his nephew to inherit, for his nephew to inherit from him, he's too busy for the most prominent black man in town, because he's the most prominent, he's one of the most prominent white men in town as his lord, certainly one of the most powerful. As we find out later, the sheriff calls him first. The buffoonery, the buffoon police chief jumps and runs to his commands. He is the most prominent white man in town, and even for a potential client, he's dismissive to L.B. Jones and tells him, hey, he doesn't have time.
Yeah, and he's also dismissive because he sort of has he has a sense that this is going to be a bad thing, in terms of if it's not he doesn't even want to take a chance, because this thing could be very messy. Seeing that L.B. Jones wants a divorce from a wife who is having an affair with a policeman. This is during a time when miscegenation was illegal, and so there was a certain amount of
let's cover it. It has its own word, miscegenation.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Nobody uses that word now.
So
Race
So he doesn't. He knows that this is going to. He feels that it's going to be messy for him, and then, you know, and he doesn't take it at first. He ends up taking the case because, you know, Lee Major, who I'm sorry, Mr. Mundine, who, you know, was played by Lee Majors, who came from the North, has Northern sensibilities, and he has a hero image about who Omen is. Omen had been the guy who defended the town against the railroad, so he sees him as a hero fighting for the little guy, and he's confused as to why are you not going to fight for this, the funeral homeowner, and one has a sense that you know, Omen is like, okay, he doesn't want the nephew to get involved with how sticky this is. So seeing that it could be something that's simple, he goes ahead and does it. Because number one, he doesn't want the nephew caught up in it. And also there's a part of him that knows that he still has to sell this idea of him being the hero for the nephew to be okay with him until he
Byron still wants to be his nephew's hero. So his nephew is, you know, he asks him, so this means that much to you? So then he decides to take it on himself, even if it's going to be trouble. I mean, he even calls it, even if it's going to be in trouble. If it's going to be inward trouble, he might as well handle that. He's not going to let his nephew fall into something and then he has to rescue his nephew. He'll just handle this case the way they get handled down here in the South. And then his nephew will be happy that he took care of it, because he likes that both. This is his beloved nephew, and both he loves his nephew and wants to pass this on to him, and he knows that his nephew loves and admires him, and he wants to keep it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
But only so much, as we'll come to find.
Yes.
Only so much is he willing to work to keep it that way.
Now, as we keep unpacking it, I guess we should probably just sort of maybe give the audience maybe just basically what ends up happening. So basically L.B. Jones wants a divorce because the wife is having an affair with the lawman. At first, the lawyer does not want to take the case, but then he reluctantly takes it. And as I sort of mentioned a little bit in the introduction, you know, it appears like it could be simple, but things are not made simple. Why? Because the wife contests the divorce, which means that there will have to be investigation, cross-examining of the racist white cop.
Correct. And the Lola Falana, who plays the much younger,
yes,
implied gold-digging wife. She's much younger than him. She's enjoying the financial fruits of being married to the richest black man in town. But she's not willing to be faithful, and more dangerously than that, she's not only not willing to be faithful to him, but she's being unfaithful to him with not just a philandering police officer, but with a police officer whose partner is a murderer, and the police officer himself is unscrupulous, a rapist, assaulter. You know, he's certainly willing to rape and assault black people, and his partner is a straight up murderer. And as we come to find out, he's a murderer who murdered someone in front of a child and then beat that child close to death. And that child is now the Nakakoto character coming home to exact revenge. So there's already revenge heading toward one of these two police officer partnership team, and the other police officer is now tied up in L.B. Jones in a love triangle as the center or the reason for the divorce. And I'll kick it back to you and saying is that L.B. Jones' wife is presented to us both as a young gold digger, but now she's got her own ambitions on top of cheating recklessly with a dangerous police officer. But she's not going to just go quietly in this divorce.
She's not going to go quietly, and she puts L.B. Jones basically in a collision course that could lead to his death, and she does it with glee. And and it's okay in terms of she gets what she wants. I mean, the thing that's really
him to either just keep accepting the circumstance.
Number of layers. So I mean, basically, without giving away too many spoilers per se, this is what the character has to go through, and we're not going to have just and it becomes triggering because this is not so much about the character in his way has to do something heroic, but this is mainly also about the systems that is working against him, that is working against who he is, even though he is the most successful Black man in this town, and that even if a cop is doing something morally reprehensible, the system is there to protect them, even from somebody who is the best of who they are in African American. And
sure.
We can continue to unpack this. Again, one of the things that makes this movie fascinating is that there are just a lot of touches in terms of this movie, but again, very, very hard to watch.
Yes.
So so you see the mechanisms in terms of, at a certain point, when the Omen tells L.B. Jones that the wife is contesting the divorce. Omen, eventually we see that he is more sympathetic to the cop who has everything to lose, as opposed to L.B. Jones, who is reasonable. He wants to have a divorce.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
This stuff of having a divorce. I mean, we've seen a number of Alfred Hitchcock movies where people are planning to kill their wives, and it's like, couldn't you have just gotten a divorce? The LM for Murder, couldn't you have just gotten a divorce? Vertigo, couldn't you just got? This person is going for a divorce. It makes logical sense, and you was like, man, it's like they just, this, he's taken to the limit. He's just taken to the limit.
Well, first off, his wife, she squarely places herself in a certain kind of villain. Not entirely stereotypical villain. I think that was part of the thing that was surprisingly favorable to you in this story that took a twist, is that she was like, oh no, I'm not going to go into a divorce uncontested because I intend to come out financially okay. And so really, I'm gonna contest this divorce, and even knowing how dangerous it would be for a Black person to contest or to even say the name of a white person in open court, to make an accusation of any kind against a white person in the South was dangerous, life-threateningly dangerous. So she basically was forcing L.B. Jones into a circumstance that would be dangerous for him socially, but also with American racism. Also, the legal system would work against him, that a Black man could not accuse a white man of anything, and certainly not a police officer of any crime. In this case, a crime that's scandalous. Accuse a white man of a crime that's salacious, that's sex-related, that would have social implications, would be dangerous for L.B. Jones. From the broader community, it would be dangerous for him, that how dare you accuse a white man of anything in open court. So his wife knows that. She's savvy enough to know that she's forcing him into a trick bag to say, you know what, I don't have to accept the divorce. I'm gonna make you accept my philandering. I'm gonna make you accept that I'm gonna stay here and be a gold digger. They show her that she, almost as if she lived in her own home. They show later that she isn't part of her home. She's basically on like the west wing of this richest Black man town's home. They do not sleep together. She has a whole wing of the house to herself with its own bathroom, with a big giant open space parlor for paintings of herself, nude paintings of herself, art, clothing, a big giant bed in which she sleeps in, presumably alone or not with her husband. Mm-hmm. And she's basically forcing him into the situation of saying, you go up against racist South and Jim Crow laws. You try to accuse a white man, or you just accept this situation like it is. I mean, she was gangster. She was just like, hey, I like you giving me money and I sleep with whoever I want. And I'm gonna stick with that.
Yeah, and there's also an additional reason as to why she's doing that too, which we were not gonna go into. So it isn't just, she's a gold digger, but she's a gold digger with a little bit of depth, in terms of her game. And so that's, so because there is a method to her madness. But this introduces to other characters of color. We outside of Lord Byron Jones, we get to see the community. He's highly respected by the Black community, and he has a very people sort of respond to him very well. They look forward to his services. They go to his funeral home. They're like, oh, they want to be told about their service. They're looking forward to being with God. And they're, basically are putting their dollars. So he sort of plays this little game with the one customer that comes in and, when she's making a payment and I have to go ahead and check again, but he plays this game where he pretends to pick the wrong coffin. And she corrects him in terms of where the coffin is, and they're having a wonderful time. We are also introduced to the character of Mom Lavorne, who raised Yaphet Kotto's character. Yaphet Kotto's character is Sonny Boy Mosby. And you'll remember Zara Cully, who plays Mama Laverne, because she played a number of mamas. She's known as playing Mother Jefferson in The Jeffersons, Fish Don't
Mother
Fry.
Jefferson.
And she also plays a motherly voodoo priestess in a blaxploitation movie, Sugar Hill, where she helps a woman whose boyfriend has been killed by the mob by using voodoo and zombie powers to exact revenge on the mobsters. So she plays, being the mama you need to go to is her thing.
Yes.
Along with those two, we are also introduced to Benny, who's played by Fayard Nicholas, who is half of the Nicholas brothers tap dancing team. So he is an assistant to Lord Byron Jones.
Yes, he is.
Nakakoto ends up indirectly, or sort of is introduced to Lord Byron Jones to sort of help look out after Lord Byron Jones, because Mama Laverne knows that Byron Jones is planning on going, going through with the divorce. They need witnesses against this cop, and this town, for the most part, has his back, even though his own wife doesn't.
At first she gives warnings. She recognizes what she's getting into, but gives fair warning that Black folks in this town, and it's important, of high and low stature. Again, it does go through the hierarchy of stature within the town. He is the richest and the prominent and beloved Black businessman with the most money. She is the juke joint owner, right? So she's at the center of the social life. She runs the juke joint, right? Where adults go for dancing and music and drinking, and it's her establishment, and she owns this establishment and runs this establishment. And she also, the intersection of them is she's also a person who's on a payment plan for our funeral. Actually, she's not on a payment plan. The intersection is when she goes and pays hers, she can pay hers upfront in cash. In fact, she's gonna go back and get it. She orders the best funeral plan that he has to offer. Okay, and she says she's gonna go back and get it. Now, again, we saw the older woman who's on a payment plan, who he makes a joke with and appeases her and makes her feel happy about her long-term monthly payment plan toward her funeral services. And then the intersection of our two storylines come together when the juke joint owner, Mama Jefferson, actress, is the juke joint owner. She's making her payment in full for the very best service that he's ever had, because she can afford that, the very best service she has. And while she's having a good conversation with him, since she's at the center of social life within the Black community, she already knows, one, that his wife's a philanderer, two, that he's going to get divorced, and then that therefore, and she knows who she's messing around with, and it's going to be trouble for him, but she's willing to stick up for him. She's saying, I will be a witness for you, even though it's going to be trouble for you and any Black person who stands up for you. I have my integrity and strength as a prominent Black woman, and just as a strong Black woman, that I will stand up for you, and my assistant will stand up for you, one of the tap dance legends that you described. We will stand up for you, but only if you're sure you want to do this thing. She's not as naive as L.B. Jones. She's trying to help L.B. Jones understand. Again, Zara Cully's character as was it Mama Laverne? Mama Lavelle?
Laverne, yeah,
Laverne. She is worldly because she runs a juke joint. She knows the ways of the world. She's making it plain to him. It will be risky for you, but we will stand up for you. And I just want to close it out. And so, since it seems like he's going to go forward with it anyway, the storylines now come together. The plot lines tie together. She says, "Well, you're going to need protection, and I know who can protect you." And she connects him with her young, I guess it's her nephew, who she raised before he.
It's the son that she raised because the mother died. Yes.
Yeah, she raised him before he got beaten by the dirty cop and fled for his life. Up until the time that he was beaten by the partner cop, who was murderous and dirty. The partner cop, she raised him. He was beaten by the partner cop and had to flee town for his life.
Where I think he ended up going. I think he was locked up in jail, and after jail, he went around to different places.
Okay.
So he was trying to.
He was beaten up and imprisoned falsely by this dirty cop.
Yeah. Yeah. Murderous cop. Yeah.
Murderous cop. There's been so many years. I was just saying, it's been so many years that his return to town, he was not immediately recognized. And Nakakoto now, after so many years, was not recognized, and since she knew he had a gun and was a strapping young man now, strapped, the intersection of the plot lines is that she's saying, well, I will give you protection. My child will watch over you and protect you. Little does she know, she's bringing her child closer to his mission, is that he wants to shoot that partner and get exact revenge on the partner police officer.
Oh, one more detail about the juke joint. It was interesting that the sign says tourist and everything, so I'm assuming the juke joint probably have both Blacks and whites going in there. And they have a dancer by the name of Jelly, who happens to be almost a spitting image of Lola Falana's character. So it brings into question, another possibility for her wanting to support, help out L.B. Jones. Could Emma Jones have been a dancer at that club, and he was able to, could have been like he had gotten her, like he picked her up from the club and because they have this moment where he's sort of looking at Jelly, and then they do a fancy cut between her and Lola Falana to the point where it just seemed almost like it's like a seamless comparison. And you sort of see the look on his face, like it's a little bit of a pained look,
Right. She reminds her of his wife. She either once was just like him, and it begs back to your question again, is like, look, if your wife is forcing you into this life or death circumstance, making it impossible for you to divorce her, he's being put in a position where we're saying, well, why not divorce her? He's been put in this position that she's making it so that I can't divorce her and I have to suffer under this infidelity and a lack of love. But you might ask the question, hey, just you cheat too. Why don't you? You're the most powerful, respected. Everybody knows that you're being cheated on and even feels sorry for you. Go find a lover for yourself. Since your wife has put you in a perilous condition.
And Benny, who Benny and Mosby sort of in a way sort of become extensions of Lord Byron. So it's interesting that when Benny goes, the dancer sort of gets in the way, they start dancing. He playfully dances because the guy has mad dance skills, but he dances with her and slips past her. So,
Right.
I don't think there's any, like I said, maybe I'm overanalyzing it, but I think there's a lot of little details, a lot of little crumbs that sort of like at least beg to answer the question. Does he know what?
Benny dances with her, but he knows better.
Exactly. Yes. And there's not a wasted moment because later on there's something else that happens which sort of ties into his relationship with the women.
You don't want to spoil it. You don't want to spoil it.
Well, yeah, no, it's. I don't think that. Well,
you don't want to spoil it.
I mean, do you want me to say? You think I should?
Don't spoil it.
So I'm not gonna say. You think I should say it because I mean we don't even know if we're gonna recommend it.
Because I'm not recommending this film, but it does have one of the best B slaps of all time.
That's the thing, the slap. Both of these are extension of Lord Byron Jones, and what's interesting is that not with Jelly, but with the other one that looks like Jelly, they're coming out of jail at the same time. And although Lord Byron isn't there to exact revenge, Benny does it for him, in terms of dealing with her. We're not going to give away the other revenge because I can honestly say the other revenge is a doozy. If you decide to watch it, all I can say is that one of the best films that came out recently, definitely had to have seen this movie for the big shocking scene that comes towards the end.
Right. Now everybody gets their full comeuppance, and I think that's the last part we'll roll into to come about. A few of the people get their comeuppance. One of them is not that much of a spoiler for a 1969 film. Because it's back to whether even we're recommending this film. The film we almost didn't recommend. That's how we started this. It does have the best B slap, I think, of all time. There's a really good B slap. That's a well-deserved final comeuppance for one of the characters, because we're not really going to get.
We're not going to get to the other one, but there's another doozy at the end too. So we'll just keep it like that.
There is. Yes, there's a very good one at the end, and I give the director credit for it. There's one at the end, and the director makes it plain, like emphasizes it even as we go to credits. Yes, we roll to credits powerfully with the emphasis of the next comeuppance.
Yeah.
But there are other aspects of it that are fundamental to this story about race that aren't. Go ahead.
Introduced during the train ride.
Oh yeah. Exactly. It was introduced during the train ride as they are coming in, is how it goes out, which is excellent filmmaking. But as this story, the inner layers of it, as the story covers this story of race and wrongdoing and bad circumstances that happen to Black folks, you gotta, beg the question, is it worth it? Does the story have enough of it? Is the B slap enough comeuppance? Well, again, this movie is not about giving a gold digger her comeuppance. So the B slap is sufficient, I think, and we move on. We had a different kind of bad spouse story, which I think gives the movie some credit. It's not your atypical. She was flexing. She was flexing her evil. She's like, no, I'm gonna have my cake and eat it too. Yeah. I'm going to cheat on you, and I'm going to cheat on you in a way that it is dangerous to your life to try to divorce me and cut me out of the money. So I say, I'm gonna just keep cheating, and you take it.
You take it. I know this is going to lead to your death. You keep going. I mean, she's essentially is a real life femme fatale, except we don't see what led her to being the femme fatale. Usually, femme fatale in the film noirs, you see them putting the moves on the guy, seducing the guy, or whatever.
Yeah, and trying to get the guy killed. She's like, no. She's telling him no.
She does not respect this dude at all.
No. No. She was like, change your mind.
In there,
change your mind and suffer through it.
Yeah.
He told him just.
He's about, honestly, he's about as impotent as that guy in Birth of a Nation who set his wife up to take him to the master's house. That's how painful it is.
So she was good. As far as having a good, villainous type character, she wasn't stereotypical in any way. She was bad. She was like, no, you suffer through it. You suffer through it. I'm gonna keep cheating on you. Your only option is to accept it as is and be cheated on or get killed. That's on you.
Yeah.
I thought that's a good villain, and she got her come up and kind of like she should. But then I guess when I move forward to components is that the only other characters around this is the most prominent white man, and yet he keeps going down the path of what you expect from prominent white man. He even reveals that he should know better, that he has opportunity for empathy, but he picks the wrong path to be empathetic on. You know, he has his beloved nephew who wants him to do the right thing. He has his beloved nephew's wife, and she's encouraging of him to do the right thing. Don't break the heart of my husband, your beloved nephew. You know, do the right thing. You know, you have an empathetic story in your life that you should have taken one way, not the other way. You shouldn't go to the standard way of race of keeping and institutionalizing these racist tropes. These things, the whole very concept of blacks and whites having sex together somehow, something that can't be. It absolutely is, and racism turned it into the jungle fever sin that supposedly was supposed to be, even as it continues, and that he should know better in the other direction, but he does not. He just continues.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely knows better. He's just willing to back up, because what's really interesting, and we also see the mechanics in terms of how law enforcement officers can rationalize, you know, the messed up behavior. You know, he betrays Lord Byron Jones to talk to the cop, gives the cop instructions in terms of how to make this thing go away. He explains to the nephew about how when he was in law school, he had quote unquote fallen in love with the colored, you know, cleaning girl, quote unquote. Well, I don't know if it's quote unquote, but basically it was that he, you know, and the way he was describing it was that she was beautiful and she basically almost saw her as human, you know, which is, you know, something that in a way a racist says. And, you know, to certain, you know, when Barbara Hershey's character sort of takes the story and rolls with it, you know, you definitely have a fact that there's a northern sensibility. She does not, she's yearning for the uncle to understand. And the thing she refuses to see is that the uncle understands. He's just going to put it in terms of whiteness, because she's describing, I think the girl's name was Caroline, and she says, "Oh, did you love Caroline?" And he explains that because of his relationship with the girl, that you know, Omen's fiance left him at the altar, and he does not, you know, he does not have a family. But what's interesting about his house, which is a big plantation style house that has columns in the front, when he is bringing the nephew and the wife, they're driving up, we see, I think we see the servant, or at least the servant's kids, greeting them ideally in the front lawn. So, and it's sort of like a nice, you know, pretty picture. We don't necessarily know if it's a show, or I'm pretty sure that the servants' kids are probably in the house. So Omen has made the decision not to, you know, for some reason he refuses to pursue a relationship because, you know, he was explaining to the son, I know this is long-winded, I'm sorry. He's explaining to the son that he really couldn't see himself having a wife and children because of the way that the law is practiced and the way he has to, you know, navigate between, you know, with racism and everything. But even though he's not married, the manservant character and the kids are sort of like his proxy or surrogate family. And what's interesting about the manservant character is that he has a sort of like a sense of humor, or does a sassy repartee, which is usually goes to female maids in a way, you know. But he has created, at least on the level, a certain family. He has, you know, kids, but is this family going to inherit his law practice? No, they're not. He may leave a little bit of money, maybe, because he doesn't really see them as humans. They're things to be placed to make his house look good.
Correct.
And so we see that, and we see
Even after his manservant completes his thoughts, even after his manservant, like you said, has the sassy repartee where he feigns that he can't hear what boss is saying, but he has a smart comeback that represents that he didn't know what boss was saying. That boss is on the phone finding out about the killing of his client, Lord Byron Jones, because Lord Byron Jones was placed in a trick bag by this lawyer. And the lawyer instigated this trick bag. He tried to find a white supremacist way of getting out of this circumstance instead of finding a way of representing his client. He tried to find a way to see if he couldn't get his client to change his mind. And if he couldn't get his client to change his mind, he was going to mess with the witnesses. And he was going to collaborate with the white police officer to put pressure and make threats. Mm-hmm. What he did not put in on is that would result in this officer being killed. He just counted on this. He counted on his client to cave in without him being able to make his client cave in. So he was an instigator of this tragedy and still didn't learn from that. After the tragedy was done, he still went forward to try to just clean it up.
Yes, and that's the thing.
Just clean it up. Not take responsibility for his role in it.
And being indifferent to it. Because there are a couple of moments where you sort of feel like, okay, well, surely he sees this is wrong. No, he's single-minded as a shark in terms of defending the whitehood.
Right.
And so he rationalizes it by taking the fact that he's not married or whatever. Oh, this could be devastating to this cop. So I'm going to do everything I can to protect this cop, even though this cop has essentially destroyed this black man's marriage in many, many ways.
His excuse being, I'm going to do everything to help this cop to not be in the circumstance that I was in, that I lost my chance at having a white family because I cheated and had an affair with a black woman. Even though this client is even though this is not serving my client, that means nothing. The client is black to me. Even as I'm taking money from the client, that means nothing to me because I'm going to keep taking the money. I'm going to even pretend that I'm even going to pretend that I'm following my client's instructions. I'm not even just going to just be openly racist and tell my client, do what I say because I'm white, even though you're paying me. No, I'm going to pretend and accept the money from my client and pretend that I'm working for my client in front of my beloved nephew. My nephew knows the moves that I'm making and has told me that my nephew has told me that he does not respect me from the moves that I'm making. But in front of my nephew, I'm going to continue to pretend to let L.B. Jones, my client, to be his advocate, while I'm at the same time working really to make it okay for the white police officer and white people. And even after L.B. Jones is destroyed, I'm just going to clean it up. I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to let some of the black people out of prison who didn't need to be in prison, kind of like a pet. I'll keep them from not suffering. But I'm just going to clean it up from here on out. I'm not going to take personal responsibility that I had for the death of my client. And I'm not going to seek out true justice because I was a part of the victimization. And when my beloved nephew confronts me, it's the one final step. My nephew feels like, I know how you feel about this circumstance. You must now feel bad. He doesn't say all of that, but he's like, his nephew still wants to give one last show of love and empathy. I know how you must feel about the circumstances you're in, Uncle. Let me help you. And he refuses that help because he knows how to solve this the Southern way.
Yeah, and this is before things get lethal because he and the nephew have a very frank discussion about, he addressed the father using the, you call it, N-word law. I shouldn't practice N-word law. But at the house, he asked, "Are you a racist?" And he goes into multiple layers. LJ Cobb playing Omen. You see the many layers that goes into, somebody who on the surface is trying to appear, respectable, but has multiple layers of racism in him.
Right. How you drop from just accepting how these circumstances are to accepting the privilege and taking advantage of those circumstances, all the way to being an actively engaged, where he is injected as the leader, the prominent leader that his nephew knew he was in the community. The mayor calls him first to clean up the mess.
Yes, the mayor.
The mess becomes fully known to everyone. The murder of L.B. Jones is known, and that mission is made by the murdering cop. It's folks are falsely accused, and this lawyer is brought in to help with the prosecution. And it becomes, patently obvious that not patently obvious, the police chief admits the method in which forced confessions were cattle prodded out of witnesses. Yeah. And so he doesn't go so far to let his own hands get dirty. He cleans that part up.
Yes.
He just cleans it up. He doesn't provide justice. He just cleans it up. He's not going to participate in bold-faced, blatant, ignorant criminality. He'll come up with a sophisticated way of being able to clean it up, sweep it under the rug, continue to be prominent and valuable to the mayor, because the mayor just wanted him to clean it up. The mayor is also fully aware of the circumstances, and he cleans it up, and he still gets to leave out as the guy who cleans things up. He's a prominent leader. He helps to sustain the racist, murderous, raping society that's there, and he helps them put a patina of respectability on it. And that, of course, which I will now put as a criticism to this film, is that we now come to the one final comeuppance. There are three comeuppances. One for the Black woman. She gets the greatest B slap in quite a while. One comeuppance, which will leave for viewers if they really want to see this film. We won't spoil that for you. That comeuppance is worth it. I think it's worthwhile. If you go ahead and watch it, you'll get some value from that comeuppance. Yeah. But then following this lawyer, this prominent lawyer, what is his comeuppance for playing a role in this? Not defending L.B. Jones. I still haven't figured out the double entendre for the title, Liberation of L.B. Jones. Maybe you can break it down for me in the audience. I still don't get that yet. He didn't save L.B. Jones. What is his punishment? And the punishment he gets is he loses the love of the one family member that he had.
Yeah, two family members.
Two family members. His nephew and his nephew's wife. Even she, who was really trying to help him keep the love of his nephew and do the right thing, and she showed love for him in the same strength, as her husband, who loved. He forfeits his love, and they leave him. They abandon him.
Yeah, his love and like
enough as a Black man. No, that is not even close to enough.
That's not. It ain't equal.
That's not even close to enough of the. It's not equal justice of what he did wrong, but that's his comeuppance.
Yeah.
Was there more to the title, Liberation of L.B. Jones? Did he get liberated?
Well, the thing is, and I don't necessarily consider it a liberation. Sometimes when people are too good for this world, they have to go to the next one. And I'm not for that kind of liberation, but.
No, thank you. And also, they have a sequence.
Definitely not in a blaxploitation movie, but not in real life either.
Not in real life either. And in this film, even as he had Black people supporting him, saying, "Hey, man, you shouldn't do this because you can't go up against white people. Something bad will happen to you. We got your back, but you're gonna get it." And they made an important point about somehow L.B. Jones was like, "Well, this is wrong. Her doing me like this is wrong. Her cheating me and forcing me to accept the circumstances of her being a cheater. And I can't do it just because I'm afraid of a white cop is the one who's cheating with is wrong." And I always wondered what it would be like to stand up to the white man. I watched a protester stand up to the white man, but he ran away. What if the protester didn't run away? Well, look.
With his shotgun pointed at him. So it was, what if
Mama LaBelle made it clear to him.
Impossible odds decided not to run.
Behind it. Yeah, he wanted to know, well, what if he didn't run? Mama LaBelle made it clear, you would just get killed.
Mm.
in America, my friend. That, let me help you understand it. You're the richest man in town, and you're a smart man. You're not really that smart in the heart. You did marry a floozy. You married a gold digger.
Oh yeah,
Stuck in a bad circumstance.
Yeah, that's a Scorpion gold digger because she's willing to just look out for herself, even if it means killing him in the process.
Correct. So did he get his liberation? No. That even though that movie tried to make it like somehow he was going to stand up for himself and just say no and see what happens. What happened was what you expect to happen. He did not. He did not get a different outcome.
Yeah, I mean, if you're into the whole idea of a spiritual liberation, like, okay, he liberated, like Romeo and Juliet were liberated. I mean, that's not.
Romeo and Juliet also liberated.
I mean, I guess in terms of
there were two star-crossed lovers who screwed up.
Not for me. Not for me.
Yeah. I don't buy that. I was like, you screwed up.
I'll take Foxy Brown any day. I'll take Foxy Brown and coffee any day.
That's so we can be together if only she gets the letter. And then she can say, oh, he's dead, so I'll drink poison too. Fool, why'd you drink poison too? If you waited a few more minutes to like, I guess my life's gonna be sad, and then he wakes up.
Okay. But
don't actually commit suicide.
No.
And I'm sorry, help me with my Romeo and Juliet. Did the first fake death, was that supposed to be suicide?
The first fake death was she was supposed to be put in
you're breaking up with me just as I'm trying to I'm just saying, was the first fake death suicide or death of old age where he got stabbed? Was it matching suicides?
He
kills themselves.
Yeah, he thought that she was dead. He takes the poison.
How?
And then
she died. How was she supposed to have died? He thought she was dead. How?
I think she thought she was dead. Oh man, now you got me.
Did he think she thought she was dead for suicide because they couldn't be lovers, and he wanted to match her suicide, or she was just dead?
He wanted to be with her. So badly that he was willing to.
So no. With her. So I stand where I was. It's not liberation. It's not liberation.
Let's stick on one thing. I know I brought up.
You did bring up Indiana Jones. All I did was go to Romeo and Juliet. I'm just saying. So no, he wasn't liberated. L.B. Jones was not liberated. It was not some liberating thing that I'm going to stand up and let these fools kill me because my wife is forcing me into this divorce. No. Find a way to live. Find another way to live and be rich. Something, anything. Get your bodyguard back. None of those things happened. His bodyguard was on foot. So they had a little bit of tragic. His bodyguard got too late because he ran.
There were a couple of moments because essentially there were a couple of moments where the bodyguard could have shot that cop, and not just that cop, the policeman coming into
Correct.
So we're going into just a lot of we agree. I mean, we're in agreement. This.
So tell them why it got further.
If you're spiritually inclined, and that's
tell them why this movie got even more complicated that we weren't sure how we were going to review it, Claude. Tell them why the more we unpacked it, it still even got more complicated than that.
Yeah. So what was interesting again? This movie was really triggering, and we were trying to just figure out how to talk about it because I mean honestly is a movie that you necessarily recommend, okay? But let's get into a little we did a little bit of research about about the writer. And Jesse Hill Ford had written a book. It was turned into the movie in 1970. But about 9 months after the movie was released, Jeffrey Hill Ford, who was writing the book sort of like as a cautionary tale, criticizing this system, ends up actually shooting an African American man who is on his property. As Jeff pointed out earlier, the town was not too happy to be identified in this book and in this movie. And I guess the movie put everything on flip mode because people who were there, you know, saw that so he had received a lot of death threats, and he was apparently concerned that his kids were supposed to be home at a particular time. They weren't there. And so he saw this car that was somewhere on his property and decided to try to confront the person with a gun.
Presumably as an outcome of these threats now. So the film itself put him in a circumstance where he felt threatened by the people of the town. So this very movie we're watching about race and about how a lawyer let a white police officer who kills a black man get off in order to clean things up and sweep it under the rug. The guy writes a movie like this, white people backlash against him. He feels threatened in his home because of the film, and accidentally, because he felt threatened, he accidentally killed a black man on his property.
He kills Private George Henry Dokes Jr., who was in the Army. So here he goes. When he wrote this book, he was basically sort of like a liberal allyship. This system is bad, but lo and behold, he becomes surprised when he's charged with murder, and then the system that he was criticizing ends up acquitting him of the murder, and I think he has to pay $25,000 or whatever. The details are actually, if you wanted to read this, in case you did not want to see the movie or before seeing the movie, there is an article written by Michael Gonzalez in a website called Crime Rates, and it's called Bone, Blood, Bigots, and the Liberation of L.B. Jones. And he goes, a little bit into the movie, but he goes into the case of Jesse Hill Ford, what happened after this movie came out. He went on to, I guess, become a teacher for a while. His wife and children left him within a couple of years of this court case. But I think in around 1996, I don't remember the exact year, he ends up committing suicide because the people who knew him said that he had never gotten past, sort of like what happened. He did, however, again, the system did help him out. He did go from sort of being the Southern liberal to a conservative. So he had done a lot of, so he made, the allyship was there until it wasn't convenient anymore. And that's why sometimes it's like, are you truly an ally, or, you just, and which brings into, a whole bunch of, different questions, in terms of when, people are doing works of art involving people of different nationalities, different heritage, and there are a lot of, this sort of, outside of this leads into just a lot of, different questions in terms of who gets to tell the story of African Americans. Do we have, if an artist who gets to be the storyteller? We talked a lot about the blaxploitation. It was great for a lot of actors and filmmakers, but a lot of the scripts were written by white artists, white writers, white directors. And I would honestly say, I don't know, this movie, I guess, it sort of dealt with sort of a Southern titillating story, the Southern pulp type of a thing. But I would honestly say, I don't know, I think it barely falls into blaxploitation. I think this was actually more like a legitimate drama of something that was happening in the South. And
it's not a blaxploitation film.
Necessarily, we don't have the expectation that Lord Byron Jones is going to get a shotgun and start blowing some things, people away.
No.
So I think it doesn't necessarily fit one's expectations. I think it is a drama, and then also it just sort of, should we highlight a movie where someone ended up possibly dying as a result of the movie, an African American private, and I guess we should probably get ready just to sort of sum up everything. So I'm thinking very much so. I think there's a lot of amazing things in terms of the making of this movie. I think there's a lot of talent and display in front and behind the camera. I cannot enthusiastically recommend that people see the movie because you sort of have to determine if it is, if you want to see it. Racism on film has been the backbone of a lot of narrative films in the United States, starting with Birth of a Nation, starting with also with Gone with the Wind. And I would honestly say, in terms of a system that is there protecting whiteness, I would actually honestly say that this would be sort of like it would be a crazy double feature if it was, this movie was being played with Forrest Gump, because Forrest Gump, you have a system that is basically supporting, the white character who's with special needs. Even if he's special needs, he's able to get, the black man's dream and the white woman's fame. So
Yeah,
I think in terms of all these things, I would honestly say, I would cautiously say that it's an interesting movie. If you're triggered, probably, you may not want to see it, but I think there is a certain amount of artistry that I don't think the movie should be buried. So in the spirit of going back to Raiders of the Lost Ark, this time it's not gonna be Raiders of the Lost Ark, it'll be Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Like young Indiana Jones says, this belongs in a museum. So it belongs, don't bury it, but don't necessarily celebrate it, but I think it should be acknowledged.
Right.
Because there's a lot of artistry that went into this. And I think that the fact that life imitated art or art imitated life, and that the story of the writer has become a tragic news story and also a cautionary tale about people who try to cancel this, make judgment about this, or whatever, that are can get caught up in stuff. I don't think people should cast lightning bolts. I think each person should enjoy, what they can, but definitely stick up for, in your way, stick up for what is right. I'm not going to recommend, go definitely see this movie, but I know if you're somebody who's interested in looking at films and you've seen the other ones, you should definitely, possibly see this one too, because this one is not just the movie. The real life stuff happens outside of it is also adds to it, and it is what it would present it.
Yeah, what I would say about it is, building off what you're saying, is your quote, your Indiana Jones quote, it belongs in a museum. I would say this is a film to study and learn from. I think this is a film that certainly a teacher might put this in part of one of their classes on race and films and race. Film junkies like ourselves should have this in their repertoire. And like I said, a person who's trying to cover during a discussion, intellectual discussion, a classroom discussion about race in America as represented maybe in cinema, or you want to use a film to help represent it in cinema. I'm not saying this is the greatest film of that. In fact, what I'm saying is a film that maybe covers some of those truths and those elements that certainly Black people already knew, or maybe some younger Black people who don't know yet need to know. And also, what we can put in our written component of our review is that article you talked about, if you're recommending it, that maybe you start with that, because it covers that full background and story and depth about how a film like this fits in an America like what we have both then and right now. It is true and a trip that the very white man who tries to write a film about race in a town that references how things happen in towns. That Black people get abused by police, Black people get killed by police, institutions and government leaders and prominent persons who could do better don't do better and sweep it on the rug. That's a fictionalized story of a fictionalized reality. And then this is a pretty good representation of this. It's certainly not a bad one. It's a pretty good film representation of stories like this. And then the history behind it, why they should read your article is maybe the reasons why a story that was a pretty good story of this kind of thing never got popular, why it didn't fit in with all the rest of the stories that we've seen, like Sounder and others, which again are great in their own ways and other different ways. I'm not putting it at the same level as Sounder. I'm just saying there were plenty of films that came out in the 70s that talk about race the way it really is in America, so that people could see for themselves. This is one of them. And let me get my irony versus coincidence together. It's coincidentally, I think it's still not ironic. It coincidentally, or maybe ironically, I guess it is ironic. It ironically turned out to get buried because the very thing of white privilege, the institutional white privilege that saved one of the characters in the movie, also both saved our director, but drove our director mad.
Writer of the book. Writer of the book.
Writer of the book. Drove, kind of ruined his life. Killed an innocent black soldier that ended up ruining this person's life, making him ruin himself. It's a story of woe that I think is worth covering in maybe a black studies class.
Yeah.
And certainly if there was a black studies class on film, this one ought to fall into it.
Yeah.
This one ought to fall into it. So this is us, your movie review men. We told you we watch all types of movies. We love film. We know you love film too. That's why we want to hear from you. Like, comment, subscribe. Are there other deep films like this that were so deep that the further you dug, the deeper you got into it? That's what happened to me and Claude.
Yeah.
The quicksand of motion picture.
Yeah.
It's a terrible picture. The goodness of it drew us even more. And the quicksand of America's incredibly incomplete discussion on race drew us into it. What films did you see like that you want to talk about and share with us more? We're your movie review man. I'm Jeff Johnson.
I'm Claude Fates here.
We'll talk to you next time.